Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the first meeting of the Equality and Diversity Committee of the Dartmouth School Committee. To start, I will note that per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A, Section 20, the public will not be allowed to physically access this diversity subcommittee meeting. The meeting will be conducted remotely. Members of the public can access the meeting via live stream at www.youtube.com/DHSTVmedia. The school committee reserves the right to implement additional remote meeting participation procedures and will notify the public of these procedures as soon as practicable. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for attending our first meeting. I'd like to thank you all for volunteering to serve on this committee. I think we're all committed to hearing what everyone has to say about what our schools are doing well and what our schools can be doing better with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I appreciate your service to the schools and to the town. I thought the first way that we should probably start out would be to introduce ourselves, since we all don't probably know each other. I know everyone shows up differently on different Zoom screens, so I'm going to call out your name and ask you to just sort of briefly introduce yourself. So I'll start. My name is Shannon Jenkins. I'm currently chair of the Dartmouth School Committee. I'm the mother of two boys who are currently at Dartmouth High School, and I work at UMass Dartmouth. I'm currently the Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. I'm already forgetting, we actually have to technically take a roll call, I believe, to open the meeting. I'm going to sometimes look to Dr. Gifford on this. So before, we're going to do the roll call and then we'll do introductions, and I will go ahead and call roll. So just indicate if you're here, please. Kathleen Amaral.
Here.
Ross Tebow.
Here.
Mark Hayes.
Here.
Kelly Bloom.
Here.
Lily Chamberlain.
Here.
Diane Massari. I thought I saw Diane. We may have, oh, there you are, Diane. Okay.
Here.
Okay, great. Thank you. I thought I was losing it for a second. All right, Elizabeth Murphy.
Here.
And Shelley Scott.
Here.
Great, thank you. All right, now that we're officially roll called in, I will ask us to introduce ourselves. Ms. Amaral, can I have you go next?
Excuse me. Kathleen Amaral. I am a member of the Dartmouth School Committee. I am parent to three. My oldest is finishing up cosmetology school, really exciting. And I have a 17-year-old who's out of district. He's got some significant disabilities. And I have a fifth grader who's near me doing her homework. I do a little bit of work for the ARC of Massachusetts, community relations. I train families of individuals with disabilities, so leadership skills. I'm currently a LEND fellow out of the UMass Medical Shriver Center. And for those unfamiliar, it's an interdisciplinary fellowship, all related to disability and disability leadership. So glad to be part of this.
Thank you. Mr. Tebow.
I'm Ross Tebow. I'm the principal of Dartmouth High School. I'm in my fourth year as principal at Dartmouth High School. I don't know if I need to share all about my family like everyone has done, but I'm the father of two school-age children, not in Dartmouth because I don't live in Dartmouth, but I'm happy to be part of this work as a representative of the high school and, both the students as well as the faculty.
Thank you, Mr. Tebow. Mr. Hayes.
Hello, I'm Mark Hayes, assistant principal at the middle school. It's my first year as an assistant principal at the middle school. And before that, I was an 8th grade math teacher there for 10 years.
Yay, my son's 8th grade math teacher too. Yeah, he loved you. All right, next, let's see, Ms. Bloom.
Hi, I'm Kelly Bloom. I'm a school social worker at the Quinn Elementary School in Dartmouth. And I also have two children that attend the Dartmouth schools. They're currently ninth graders at the high school.
Awesome, thank you. Ms. Chamberlain.
I am Lily Chamberlain. I teach Spanish at Dartmouth High School, and I'm the advisor to the Multicultural Club. And my two kids graduated from Dartmouth High. My son is now out of college and working as an engineer, and my daughter is currently in college.
Awesome. Ms. Masari. You have to unmute. Sorry.
I should really know this by now because I was just telling a parent today that I've been so, savvy with my Zoom and Google Meet. So I apologize.
That's okay. I think you guys use Google Meets more than Zoom. So
Yeah.
sorry for Zoom's not quite as familiar to you all. Go ahead.
So I am the 7th grade guidance counselor at Dartmouth Middle School.
Awesome. Thank you. Ms. Murphy.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Murphy. I live in Dartmouth. I am a parent of two students, 10th grade and 8th grade. And I was an independent college counselor in Dartmouth for a number of years, and I have transitioned now. I'm actually in school full-time, and I work for the Unitarian Church in Fairhaven doing immigration justice work.
And last but not least, Ms. Scott.
Hi, everyone. Let's see. I work here at UMass Dartmouth as the Director of New Student and Family Programs. I've had the pleasure of living in Dartmouth for about 14 years. Our oldest is 31. She graduated from Dartmouth High School. She spent her last year and a little bit here in Dartmouth. And we have an 8th grader and a 5th grader in the Dartmouth school system. I'm very happy to be here and hope I can help.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate that very much. As you can see, I think hopefully from our introductions, the school committee and trying to put together this committee very much wanted to try to get representation from the different schools, right? And different perspectives within the schools and different perspectives within the community. I do know, which we'll discuss later, there will at some future date be a high school student representative. We'll get to that discussion in a little bit. One of the things that, as we talk about our charge this evening, the school committee has tasked us with thinking about is whether the representation we have on this committee is adequate, and whether or not there are perspectives that are missing from our committee. We do not have the ability to change the composition of the committee, but we can report back to the school committee and ask them for additional members if we think there are viewpoints that we're not hearing from, because obviously our goal is to be open and inclusive to all sorts of different viewpoints. I thought we'd start tonight by talking a little bit about sort of the role of the committee, how the committee was organized, what we need to do with respect to organization. I will also say don't panic, even though the Zoom is scheduled to 9. I don't intend to, I hope we're not here until 9. I think we're just going through some preliminary stuff tonight and figuring out where we want to go. When the school committee created this committee, we created it with, we ended up, I think, with 10 members, 1, 2, 3, 4, 11. We added 1 because we ended up with 3 staff members for different perspectives. So 11 members. At some point, we would like to get to have people having 2-year appointments. But for the initial appointment, we decided what we're going to do is 1-year appointments. And then once we're done with that 1 year, we may renew or not, but we'd like to get to staggered appointments, because if the whole committee turns over every year or every 2 years, you lose some of that continuity. So your initial appointment is for 1 year with potential for renewal. If anybody has a question at any time too, just sort of raise your hand. Per sort of, I guess it's Massachusetts general law, we are a subcommittee created by the school committee, as such, we are subject to open meeting law. Kathleen and I know, and maybe some of you all are familiar with some of the requirements of open meeting law. Some of you may not be. I really want to highlight just a couple things here about open meeting law that are important. One, under open meeting law, we may not deliberate via email. All right, because when you're communicating via email, that deliberation or discussion is by definition only available to the people on the email chain. Therefore, you're violating open meeting law. So it's okay, you know, to share maybe a piece of information. For instance, I am going to share something that I found, a website, and I may send that to you. We then cannot engage in a discussion about, oh, I like this, or I would change this, or I would do that. That's a violation of open meeting law. The second really important thing about open meeting law, I know all of you, some of you may know each other. Open meeting law requires that we do not have discussions or deliberations in private. So you may talk to one other person, right, about that, but you may not have what are known as serial one-on-one conversations. So I couldn't call, you know, Mr. Tebow and say, hey, let's talk about X, and that's one-on-one, so we're not violating open meeting law, and then call Mr. Hayes and say, hey, Mr. Hayes, let's talk about X, because those are serial one-on-one conversations, all right? So those are also violations of open meeting law. And again, the goal is to prevent the committee to pre-discuss an issue, not while that deliberation is open to the public, and therefore them not having access to it, okay? I will see if I can find you guys some more resources about open meeting law. I don't want you to get freaked out about this, but I do really want to sort of inform you of our duties as a subcommittee of the Dartmouth School Committee. I'm going to probably from time to time look at Dr. Gifford because she's also very familiar with these things. Dr. Gifford, I should ask you also to introduce yourself. You're not an official member of the committee. I think everyone knows you, but maybe I might ask you to introduce yourself and then also let me know if you think I've missed anything with respect to open meeting law.
So far, so good. Obviously, I'm superintendent. I'm just finishing up my 6th year. And since everybody else mentioned their kids, I'll mention mine. I have 2 much older students. I'm not students anymore, sons. But I wanted to mention, I think it was Diane saying about the Google Meet and the, you know, messing up. Today I had my mask around my neck, as we all do, walking around with them in my office, and then proceeded to ask Kate where it put it. I couldn't find it on my desk. I couldn't find it anywhere. And it's like, it's just the crazy stuff that's happened through pandemic, right? But anyway, we're just happy that you all wanted to be part of this group. So thank you for stepping up.
So I think rules of, I went and I did some reading this evening about, and I looked at the minutes and we had a conversation about this. Because we are a subcommittee of the school committee, we do need to elect a chair and a vice chair of this subcommittee, as well as designate someone a scribe. We're going to have to do nominations. We can open this up for discussion. I am willing to serve as chair of this committee in part because I'm familiar with open meeting law and procedure. But if anyone else is dying to do this, I would also be happy to hand it over to any one of you. So why don't we have first order of business then will be to open nominations for chair of this committee.
I would like to nominate Shannon Jenkins for chair of this committee.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for chair? Don't all step forward at once. I know it's a really enticing job. All right, so I will close the nominations. At this point now we can have a discussion of the nominations. If anybody has any comments, concerns, questions? Okay, so hearing none, this is normally at the point if we were all in a room, we would all say aye or nay. But we are in a Zoom open meeting. Therefore, under those provisions that Governor Baker put forward, we need to do a roll call. So Miss Amaral,
Yes.
okay, Mr. Tebow,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Ms. Bloom,
Yes.
Miss Chamberlain,
Yes.
Miss Masari,
Yes.
Miss Murphy,
Yes.
and Miss Scott.
Yes.
And I suppose I will vote for myself too. So that passes unanimously. Now we need to elect a vice chair. So I will open nominations for that as well. My hope is that we do sort of our work collaboratively, and these are more just for sort of procedural titles because we have to have them. And as such, I was thinking it might make sense to have Kathleen be the vice chair, unless any of you wants to step in and run an open meeting under open meeting law if I am unable to. So I'm chair. I can't make that nomination. If someone else would like to nominate Kathleen or someone else, Miss Scott, go ahead.
I would like to nominate Kathleen Amaral for vice chair.
Excellent. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Okay, Mr. Tebow, we get that. Are there any other nominations? All right, hearing none, I will close the nomination. Are there any discussion about the nomination, questions, concerns, issues? All right, if not, I'm going to go backwards this time on our roll call. Miss Scott,
Yes.
Miss Murphy,
Yes.
Miss Masari,
Yes.
Miss Chamberlain,
Yes.
Miss Bloom,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Tebow,
Yes.
Ms. Amaral,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. The last thing we need to do is to nominate someone to be, we need someone to take minutes. I'm taking minutes right now. Do we want to rotate the taking of minutes? Do you think that works? Alternatively, Dr. Gifford, would you be willing to track motion? I mean, I think we mostly have to do broad contours. Would you be willing to do that for us?
Yeah, I'm actually taking some minutes for you right now, so I don't mind.
Perfect, thank you. So if that's okay with everyone, we'll have Dr. Gifford sort of keep the minutes for us, and then we can approve them when we move forward. Do we need to, Dr. Gifford, do we need to officially appoint you? Do we need to do a roll call and motion all that?
No, I'll just volunteer.
Okay, great. All right, so that's great. See, look, we already have checked off 2 things on our agenda. All right, so the first thing I think to start with really sort of substantively is to review the charge that the school committee has given to us that they approved. I am going to say, let me see if I can find it. I think I can share my screen. Hold on, I need to figure out what I need to share with you guys. Okay, is that we approve this charge as a school committee. Can you all see that now? So we approved that on the 7th of December, as you can see there. But again, one of the things that the school committee wanted us to report back on is whether we thought this charge was appropriate. I will email this all to you in case you haven't seen it. But let's just go through it really quickly. And I believe Ms. Waite and I worked on developing this. We found this from some charges from some other diversity, equity, and inclusion committees in other school districts. So the first is to examine the cultural aspects of our community, including language, culture, student performance, and program participation, and discipline data to inform our policy and/or procedural recommendations. 2 is to solicit input from diverse members of the Dartmouth school community around issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, including but not limited to current policies, procedures, curriculum, facilities, communications, and messaging from the Dartmouth Public Schools. 3, review and recommend diversity, equity, and inclusion related policies for the district. 4, review district and school plans through an equity and inclusion lens and research best practices and innovative methods for cultivating a safe, equitable, and inclusive environment with an intent to recommend best practices to the school committee. Make recommendations to the school committee on equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout the district with regard to allocation of resources, ongoing activities, and strategic investments to shape future direction. Recommend practices and policies involving ongoing professional development for staff and training for students and families in issues of diversity and equity. Educate and inform the community on equity, diversity, and inclusion issues. And then finally, establish appropriate timelines to complete tasks and make recommendations to the school committee. So it's a pretty broad charge. I don't necessarily think that we need to fully process it right now. I think all of you probably want to read and look at this some more. But I will open it up to see, does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns on a first sort of pass at that charge of the committee? If you do want to raise your hand, you want to say something, just let me think. Maybe I'm going to stop share so I can see you all. Does anybody have any comments or questions or concerns about that? It's pretty broad, I think. It allows us some flexibility to do a lot of different things. At the same point in time, I don't think we want to try to tackle all of those things, right, to start, because there's a lot there. And that sort of gets, I think, to really what our last item is on the agenda, and our biggest and I think most important thing is to talk about what it is we want to do and how we want to start and how we want to proceed, given that charge, given what we're interested in. So I would be interested to maybe start off that conversation to hear some of your ideas of issues you'd like to tackle, things that you would like for the committee to investigate, proceed with. I'm open to any sort of thoughts right now.
Can I start?
Go ahead, Lily. Thank you for breaking the ice. It's like a teacher's nightmare, right? When you ask a question. But I've learned in my years of teaching that if you outweigh people, if you wait them out, right, they get more uncomfortable with the silence than you do. So appreciate you breaking that silence, Lily. Go ahead.
That's a good one. I didn't wait very long, so I think I need to study that technique. So we did receive a letter from the Naacp of New Bedford, correct?
Correct, yes. And I can share it with the committee if anybody.
Seems like that might be something that we should address, since it was addressed to the school committee and to the school department.
Okay, and the letter from the NAACP was around the issue of the mascot. I'm trying to remember, it's been a while. I think it was, is that the letter that you're referring to, Lily?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, and I will also say that I think, Kathleen, correct me if I'm wrong, that was an issue very much that was at the heart of this formation of this committee, but it's not sort of the only issue we decided we're going to look at. So that's, I think, one thing that we can start looking at, one issue item on our agenda. What else? Other thoughts? Do we want to start with that issue? Thoughts on that?
Yes,
Elizabeth, go ahead, and then Shelley. Yes, you do. So Elizabeth, you're interested?
I'm in agreement on that. Yeah, I do think that was a big part of the founding of this subcommittee. So I think it's a logical starting point.
Okay, Ms. Scott, I saw you raise your hand.
I definitely think it's an important issue that we should discuss. As we're a new working group, I'm wondering if there are other issues or other ways that we can start to get to know each other as a group and be able to express ourselves and get a sense. I think that the mascot issue is a really big and important one. So I definitely respect, Elizabeth, your point of view on starting with that, and I could get with that, but I wonder if we should consider if there are other issues. I was also going to suggest, I don't know this, so maybe there's some reading I should do, but what our policies are. I did read the handbook for Quinn Elementary, I promise you, but it was a while ago. I would love to know more about dress codes and how we're doing that, especially for students who identify as male, female, whether they are transgender or cisgender. That would be, I think, an interesting thing to look at for this group.
Excellent. Other thoughts or ideas? I will go ahead and take the prerogative of the chair and add sort of one of my thoughts. I agree with Ms. Chamberlain and Ms. Murphy that I think tackling the mascot issue is important. It was one of the main impetuses behind the creation of this committee by the school committee. I would be in favor of tackling that first. And then one of the things I think for me, particularly as a social scientist, is I want to find out what I don't know. And I don't wonder, like at our institution, Shelley, you may know, we're doing a sort of a climate survey or an inquiry into sort of what is our campus climate around issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so to me, as a committee charged with receiving input from various actors, one of the things I think might be worthwhile for us to tackle is, what do people think? What are our strengths? What are we doing well? And what are some of our weaknesses where we can improve? And so some sort of way of tackling what not just the public, but also members of our school community, teachers, staff, students, think about what are important issues. Again, what we're good and what we need to work on, I think might also help us give some direction. So for me, in addition to, I really do want to start with a mascot, but also starting with the issue of what do we know about this would be important to me. Other ideas. I'm seeing this as sort of a brainstorming session, so we can get some ideas out on the table, and then we can sort of talk about how we want to move forward. So other ideas?
Dr. Jenkins, I agree with that idea about some kind of survey or assessing the climate. That was something I thought would be important too. I'd like to get a sense from students, but also maybe staff and parents and community members about, you know, how do they feel included or validated or accepted at school and feel like their voice is recognized and their experience is reflected in the curriculum or in the language that we use. And I'd like to hear what their concerns are, you know, what they see as struggles in our community and areas where we can improve. So I think that would be a real good issue to kind of tackle early on. So that could help guide us a little bit in what we should be addressing. I also kind of thought about students who are transgender, and you know, I know that's something that kids are coming out with more and more, and what is their sense of acceptance, inclusion, and policies that have kind of been changed, particularly at the high school level, but I imagine the middle school level a little bit regarding that. I'd like to kind of look at kind of our diversity statistics as far as, you know, different ethnic groups or racial backgrounds for students that we have in our schools, as well as our staff. And, you know, I think it's always great to make sure that kids feel like their faces are reflected, their voices are reflected in our kind of our curriculum, as well as our staff, you know, and I think that's probably an area where we can improve in, you know, having kids see themselves reflected more. So I'd like to see that issue kind of brought up too. I think certainly the issue of race is very much in our culture right now, and race relations. So I hope that will be something that we can look at too, possibly through the survey about how kids feel regarding that in our community, and the openness or the acceptance, or again, their voices and experiences being reflected.
Yeah, I think that's I think it's important to get some idea of climate, and also some information about policies, and just being really careful on how we think about this. So I'm just going to give a small example. We do school reports every year, right? Every school has to put together this massive report. And I never noticed it till this year, but DESE requires us to report the number of male students and the number of female students, right? And I'm going to get everyone going back and looking, but I noticed this year that one person reported non-binary students and they're one school and there was none, right? But just the act of putting that line in the report to me meant so much, right? And so it's those very, I think, little things that we're gonna, I think, start hopefully noticing and looking at in ways that create that sort of community that we're talking about. Ms. Bloom, I like the idea of maybe, I hate to ask our staff to do more work, but maybe some sort of short presentation at our next meeting about some of the statistics and data that you talked about is something maybe we might put together, and I can work with Dr. Gifford on that, that we can help sort of inform sort of where we are, just in terms of just basic data, right, about the district. So maybe that's something we might want to put on our agenda to start early to get us all up to speed. Other thoughts, ideas, comments?
I would just add onto that I do think when we start to look at the issues of gender and things like that, we want to think also maybe through the lens of professional development. I know sometimes from doing this work that the language is really new for a lot of people, and it's really helpful, and we can actually make gains pretty quickly on a lot of this stuff when people have the same understanding of terminology that is used and how it's developed and why things are talked about in different ways, that sometimes if we just jump right to the data and things like that, people don't always understand what they're looking at. So focusing on the professional development side would be a priority.
Yeah, I also think too, one of the issues we'll talk about too in just a minute here is we're all a little bit old folk, right? I mean, we all have kids in the school, maybe not all of us, right? But I say that in the context of, Elizabeth, your point is for us, a lot of this terminology may be new, but I know for our kids, it's less so. And so I do think it's important for us to think about, right, how do we involve students? It is also professional development, but also students, because, even though I'm not a boomer and there's nothing wrong with it, that is what my sons say to me when I do something that's not quite right. Oh, you're such a boomer, Mom, right? And so I think that will be helpful to us too. Other thoughts? I know it's our first meeting, and so we're really just getting started, and it's hard to build rapport, right, when you're just boxes on a Zoom meeting. But what I really do want us to start thinking about is how we move forward and how we build momentum and how we make progress on this. To me, it seems like it might make sense for us all to do some reading and thinking in advance of our next meeting. We can share some statistics. We can do maybe a little informational presentation at our next meeting. We can think about our charge, and we can think about some of the ideas that we've floated and how we want to do this. I will say, in talking about plans, I've seen a couple of different models for diversity committees and how they operate. One is to have the whole committee sort of focus on one or two critical issues at a time. So we're really like all collectively working on this one thing, and then we move on and we all work on the next thing. And so it's broad, and then all of us are working, but narrow in focus, right? So that's one option. The second way I've seen committees work is they work on multiple issues at a time, and they divide into smaller like working groups. Right? So maybe a couple of people are researching about mascots and someone else is researching about transgender issues, right? And then those work groups kind of come back to the committee and we talk about those issues. I don't have a strong preference for either mode of operation. Again, I'm throwing a lot of ideas out at you, in part because I can't throw them out at you in email because that would be a violation of open meeting law. So I think it might make sense for us to just sort of throw some of these questions out there, right? How do we want to operate? And we think about it and we come back together and get another meeting. Do we want work groups or do we want to focus sequentially on issues? Or is there another mode of operating that I don't know about? We have a list of things that we might get started with. Let's think about sort of how we want to prioritize them, right? And then come back and discuss. The third thing I would say is that charge, right? Let's all look at the charge and see if we have any concerns, additions, questions, comments. I think that would be good. Are there any other items and we can also think about what other items we might want to discuss, right? As part of that homework, maybe we'll call it. Are there any other items we want to sort of get out on the table for the committee to think about before we do our next meeting? I've got the mascot, I've got issues around gender, particularly transgender, dress codes, we've got sort of climate, right? Just sort of broadly and an assessment of climate. And then some information, right? Those are some different topics that we can work on. I think doing information makes sense at our next meeting, and then we can sort of tackle about those other tasks. Mr. Tebow, may I ask you about, I want to not forget this and circle back around about having a student member. I know we're super late in the school year now. And so I just kind of want to hear your thoughts about, the idea was I think you were going to find someone from the high school to be a member of this committee.
Yes, that was the plan. And so we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion club that's only met a couple of times this year.
Okay.
We were in part waiting for this group to meet. That's a small group of students. I know Lily has the multicultural club. You know, I'm sure there'd be students interested from that group that would obviously bring a perspective here as well. You know, I don't think we'd have a problem finding a student if it's just one student we're looking for. You know, I've had multiple students express interest. So how you would want me to go about selecting one particular student, you know, I'm open to, because I think there are multiple student groups within our school that would generate students who are interested in this type of work. So I don't know.
So I want to say one thing and then Ms. Scott, I'll come to you. I see your hand up. So one, I will say right now, the school committee has one slot for a student right now. So we would have to go to the school committee to ask for more slots for a student. If we want, the intention is that student will be a full voting member of this committee. Oftentimes student members are not voting members. We did not make such a stipulation so that student would be a voting member. Ms. Scott, you have a question, comment?
It was just related to that. Do we have to be limited to one student, or could we possibly have more than one, I guess, with voting rights, especially if the student senses a power dynamic, even if it's not really there, it may be helpful for both students to have each other and help them to feel more comfortable contributing to the group. It's just a thought.
Sure. And again, I think the school committee, is fair to say, Kathleen, correct me if I don't think I'm wrong, was very open to our input to make these changes. So I don't want to suggest the school committee was like, no, you cannot. It's just under the way the rules work. That's how we have to ask them, and then they have to authorize us. So if we feel like 2 would be fine, Kathleen and I can go up and do a report and ask, and we can have that vote. So other people's thoughts on one member, multiple members? Lily, can I ask you? I know you have, Mr. Tebow said you're the advisor to that club.
You know, I'll be honest, many of my students are graduating this year, so I'm going to be recruiting a bunch of new students next year, and I don't think it makes sense for us to have a senior on the committee, correct? But I also think, you know, we have the GSA. Is it still called the GSA, Ross? But it stands for something different. Anyway, yeah, we have the GSA also at our school, and that might be another place where we might find people who would be interested in being on the committee. But yeah, I think two would be better than one. I think it's hard to be the only kid in a group like this, for sure. Yeah.
Other thoughts, comments? So
I agree about the idea of two more than one. I think that would increase comfort for students.
Okay, so it seems to be there's a little bit of consensus here that we would like to ask the school committee to allow us to appoint 2 student members to the committee. Is that correct? All right, so I will entertain a motion to formally make that request of the school committee. Would someone be willing to make that motion? Shelley, you will make that motion. Go ahead, Shelley.
So do I move to request formally from the school committee that we have 2 student members?
Thank you. And do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, so Mr. Tebow seconded that. So we have a motion by Ms. Scott and a second by Mr. Tebow to request an additional member, which would bring us up to 2 up for the school committee. Is there any other discussion about that? I just have one other question I want to ask Mr. Hayes. Mr. Hayes, I think we're all working under the assumption that probably middle school not quite be ready for this, but I just want to, it might be a little intimidating for an 8th grader, but I just want to verify that with you since you work with middle schoolers, whether you think we should have someone from the middle school, like a student.
I do think that it could be a challenge for, what we'd be talking about as a 7th grader, incoming 8th grader, to be the voice of the building in effect. It is certainly, I think from my perspective, I think one of the most important things that we can do as a group is, and it was brought up already, is to make the school building a comfortable place for all of our students and staff. I think from my perspective, that's the most important piece here, for educational purposes, for comfort at work purposes, which then directly affect our students' education. So I do think with myself and Ms. Massari on the committee, I think that we're hopefully able to garner the voice of the middle school. It might be tough for a 13-year-old to do so, but I'd like to think and hope that we're able to bring that to the committee.
I 100% agree. I didn't want to operate under an assumption. And so I just wanted verification that the assumption that we were making was correct. So we're asking to add another high school student, right? So by students, we mean high school. And I just wanted to verify that. Any other comments, concerns, any sort of discussion about that? Okay, so I will roll call this one. Ms. Amaral.
Yes.
Mr. Tebow.
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Ms. Bloom.
Yes.
Ms. Chamberlain.
Yes.
Ms. Massari.
Yes.
Ms. Murphy.
Yes.
And Ms. Scott.
Yes.
And I will also vote yes. All right, so that's unanimous. Ms. Amaral and I, luckily I'm the chair of the school committee too, so I get to make the agenda. So I'll put us on the agenda for our next meeting, and we will make that request of the school committee. I don't think there'll be any difficulty with that. Mr. Tebow, I'm not sure, that doesn't really answer your question of how to select these students. But I guess I might say that I don't know if any of I don't really know. I'm not sure I can offer you guidance. You know your school and your students best. Is the committee comfortable with maybe sort of empowering like Mr. Tebow and maybe incorporating input from Ms. Chamberlain and other people in the high school to identify those students? Or are there any things you would like Mr. Tebow to do in identifying those students? Any thoughts on that? Ms. Scott.
I know when I'm looking to identify student leaders here at the university or students to be involved, there's a Freudian slip. A lot of times we have the same student leaders that do everything. So I know I have to challenge myself to really cast the net very widely and really try to reach those students that just because you're not, the student government president or what have you, you're not the that you may still just have excellent insight because you are more the everyman or every woman at your school. So I don't really have a method for doing that other than maybe marketing really well, or sometimes asking teachers to nominate students, sort of like the unsung hero type student. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but just a thought and something that I try to do in practice in my work too.
I think that's a great idea. And I will add on my 2 cents. Looking at us, I'm so grateful that all of you have volunteered for this committee. But we are a very white committee. We are. And I would very much like to give priority to consideration of demographic characteristics when picking students who are going to be on this committee. I think it's important, right? As a social scientist, I know group discussions, who you have at the table matters. And so your discussions are better and richer when you have different voices and different viewpoints at the table. And I know as a white woman that I experience the world differently, right, than people with different demographic characteristics. So I would really hope that that we can add, here's what I will say: principles of affirmative action. If you have equally qualified candidates, right, then these are the things that should matter, and that's what we should consider. So I'd like for us to cast a very wide net, to Ms. Scott's point. And if we're like, wow, we have 5 really good candidates, then I think that the considerations of diversity should be important in that decision. That's my point of view. Again, I'm open to, would love to hear other people's thoughts.
I agree with you.
All right, so does that give you some guidance, Mr. Tebow, of how to go about doing that?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so I know it's late. Everyone's had a long day. We've mostly gone through the items on our agenda. There's one other thing I think I really want to discuss with you all with respect to plans, and then I'll see if you have anything else. My other question is about sort of meeting dates, times, frequencies. We're all here on a Tuesday night at 6:30. Does that work for people, generally speaking? I know not everyone's going to be able to make every meeting, but if someone's like, Tuesday nights don't work for me, I had to rearrange everything to be here, I want to take that into consideration. Does anybody have any sort of long-standing permanent commitments on Tuesday nights? Okay, I'm hopeful. We talk about things we might want to keep from the pandemic. And while I am tired of Zoom, Zoom nighttime meetings are really nice. I'm sure Dr. Gifford agrees, as a superintendent, Mr. Tebow, Mr. Hayes, right? Having to go to nighttime meetings all over the place. It's nice to be able to Zoom from your house and couch. That's not to say all of our meetings should be in Zoom, but I'm hopeful we can continue some of this because it is really quite convenient. How frequently do we want to meet? I know we're just getting started. Most of the committees that I've seen, the diversity committees, are once a month, which seems about right to me once we get going, right? I feel like now, 1 month from now is really a long time from now, too much. So do we want to do 2 weeks from today, 3 weeks from today? What is it? I think, like, again, as we're getting started, maybe a little bit more frequent, and maybe through like May and June, maybe have a few frequent meetings. And then in the summer, maybe give everyone a little break and then pick back up maybe monthly in the fall. But what do you think, 2 weeks from tonight or 3 weeks from tonight? What's ever? Shelley, I see a 2. Elizabeth, Lily, 2. All right, I see lots of 2s. All right. So that seems to be a straw poll. So that would put us at, I'm going to whip out my calendar here. Let's see, what's that? That would be
18th.
The 18th, right? So we would meet again on Tuesday, May 18th at 6:30. Sorry about that confusion around 6 or 6:30, but we would do 6:30. we will sort of write up the minutes, and I will send an email to you. We talked about doing a little thinking and research before our next meeting. And that would be, I will send you the charge to take a look at that. We're gonna sort of think about that, see if we want to make changes to that. 2, we're gonna think about how we want to operate serial, one task at a time with all of us into smaller working groups. We are going to come back around to discussing like what it is we're going to move forward on first, one or multiple things. And then also next meeting, we'll start off probably with a little presentation, some background information. I will work with Dr. Gifford on that. If there's anything in particular that you want to learn more about, you have data, information that you want to know, let us know and we'll see if we can find it. Are there other things that you would like to discuss around our plans, our charge, any of that? Ms. Scott, go ahead.
Just really quickly, I forgot to mention it before, land acknowledgements. And I have done some research on that, and I'm not an expert, but I could share some information if helpful.
That would be great. We're working on that issue at UMass Dartmouth. You and I have had some conversations about that. For those of you, not familiar with land acknowledgements, but land acknowledgement statements are just acknowledgements by institutions, of sort of the origins of the lands on which our institutions reside, as an acknowledgement of that history. They started, I believe, Shelley, correct me if I'm wrong, in Canada as part of sort of a Native Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And so they have been more common. There's some controversy surrounding this, in part because if you just do a land acknowledgement statement and that's it, I might personally say if you do a land acknowledgement statement and have a mascot, I don't know. But I also think maybe that could be folded under that sort of broader umbrella related to that. I'll also note one of the things that I'm working on campus, and I say this to Mr. Tebow as we look to next year, some of these things are great student projects. Right? Like I think having a student do research about the history of I can think of that as being great for like an AP research or an AP capstone project, right? So some of this work, I think from my perspective, it would be great for some of our students to do because it's kind of the ultimate engaged learning experience. So that's something I think we as a committee can do to think about how we can engage students in the work that we're doing to help us accomplish that work. I'm always a big fan of that. Other things to add? Comments, questions, concerns, Lily? Sorry.
So are we going to try to have the, sorry, are we going to try to get the students at the next meeting?
That would be the hope. I know it's a short time frame. When is our next school committee meeting? Kathleen or Bonnie, do you remember?
That Monday,
May 17th.
the 17th.
Okay, so we can, I think we should be able to get that authorization to add that second student at our next school committee meeting. So Mr. Tebow, do you think you can make that 18th date?
Yeah, I think that's doable.
Okay. Fabulous. So that's a good question. We will try to make that happen because I think the earlier we bring them in, the better. I think that would be good.
Sure. And just one more question. I don't know, Dr. Gifford, if we have information about linguistic diversity, like how many people speak a different language at home. I mean, sometimes that shows we don't know.
Well, we do the yearly English, other languages at home, but I'm not quite sure how we tabulate that or keep that. I'll have to check that in the office.
That's okay. Just wondered if we had that information.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting though, too, right? As we think about like the data you keep oftentimes matter, right? I'm reading a book about like the equity data, walking the data walk and talking the data talk, right? And we can't do the work, right, without having the data. And so some of it maybe is per our charge, like maybe we want to recommend that we collect data on what languages are spoken at home, right? So we have a better sense of that. And so I think we learn as much about what we don't have sometimes from what we do have. So that's a great question, Ms. Chamberlain. Other questions, comments, concerns?
I would just say that I think that sometimes opens up a whole different set of questions too, because if you're trying to get at what languages people speak at home, how are you trying to get that information and in what language are you doing so? So that means we kind of need to look at some of that too, potentially, because there can be a lot of communication issues.
Good point. Yeah. Other comments, questions? All right. Well, again, I really want to thank you guys all for volunteering to serve on this committee. You know, I know the district and our schools do good work and we focus on this, but I think the more eyes, ears, and brains you have working on an issue, better. And I'm looking forward to working with you all on these issues. I will send an informational email with the charge, with the questions we decided on for you to work on. We will also circulate an agenda and minutes prior to the next meeting. But in the meantime, I guess I will entertain a motion to adjourn unless there's anything anyone else would like to talk about.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Amaral. I thought we were going to be here all night. So I have a motion by Ms. Amaral. Do I have a second? Ms. Murphy, thank you. All right, a motion by Ms. Amaral and a second by Ms. Murphy. I think that this is also going to be unanimous, but I still technically got to do the roll call. Ms. Scott. Sorry, sometimes I go backwards and I throw Shelley off. That's a yes. Okay, we all see that. Ms. Murphy.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Ms. Massari.
Yes.
Ms. Chamberlain.
Yes.
Ms. Bloom.
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Tebow.
Yes.
Ms. Amaral.
Yes.
And I am also a yes. Thank you very much. I really look forward to working with you guys. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. You
Thank
too.